there was a long period of time where I sat there and joked, I'm in way over my head, not qualified whatsoever, but we'll just keep going.
Today on Time to Discuss, I have Joel McKay with me. Joel, thanks for joining me.
No, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, Joel, this is going to be a very interesting one. You are a funder. So, I've heard of angel investors. I heard of venture capitalists. I've never heard of funders. So I don't know if they're the same thing or different, but fortunately, you do. So, tell us first, what is a funder?
Well, funder is typically steering government money, public sector money into specific projects to get things built. So we might be government, we might not be, but typically the source of the funding is coming directly from a central government. Now, in the US, that might be a local government, a state government, or the federal government. In Canada, where I'm located, it might be a local government, a provincial government, or a federal government.
Interesting. So I was way off base.
Not that actually, no, you're not that far off the base because in my particular work, like early stage investors, angel investors are kind of in the same universe. So the work that I do is economic development funding. So we steer dollars into things that are going to create jobs, drive business growth, like help the economy, right? And that's kind of what angel investors do. Now they're in it for a different purpose. Their purpose is to realize, a return on their investment over a period of time. And they accept a level of risk for that. We accept a level of risk, but we're not looking for a direct financial return. We're looking for a social benefit or an economic benefit to society. So our funders, why we describe ourselves as a funder, is we'll provide a grant or a loan instead of taking like an equity position in a company.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so do you operate at and I apologize because you kind of said this. I don't know if you answered this already. Do you operate at the local level or higher up in the government? Where, and does it exist in multiple stages, I guess? How does that all work?
Well, that's a good question. So we're an odd beast. So the organization that I oversee is called Northern Development Trust. So we're an economic development agency for Northern British Columbia. We serve an area, believe it or not. Usually listeners in the U.S. love to hear this. So we serve an area the size of France, which is just the northern portion of British Columbia, which is one province in Canada. So it gives you a sense of the size and scale of Canada. But there's only 330,000 people in that area. So there's a lot of smaller communities, sparse territory, a lot of forest, and a lot of large carnivores in the area that we serve. So, like, what do we do in that area? Well, we were set up by our province. So the province is similar to a state government in the U.S. And we were given a chunk of change about 20 years ago and told go out and do good things with the economy for that. So we have our own money and it's invested and we earn a return off of that. And then the money that we get in the market in our return is what we put into community development projects. And that might be anything from like helping an airport expansion to small business growth, but it might also be like really, things people don't normally think about with the economy, which is like helping a community hall get a new roof or public bathrooms in a downtown area that doesn't have them. Or it might be mountain bike trails to encourage tourism traffic. So we're operating, when you ask the question, like, are you operating at the provincial or the local level or the federal level? So we are set up at the provincial level, but often our grants are actually going into the local level. Almost, I would say, like 100% of what we do is going into the local level and it's steered by local organizations. So we describe ourselves as the money fairies. So when, not-for-profit groups, businesses, or local governments or indigenous governments have projects that they want to move forward that help the economy, they might come knocking on our door and see if it fits one of our programs or something we're interested in funding. And if it is, it goes through a process and then we provide that funding to get that thing built.
Okay, that all makes sense. So, Joel, how about a typical day? What's a typical? And I know a lot of times people say no day is typical for me.
Yeah.
But what are some of the common things that occur on the daily basis or the weekly basis or even the monthly basis for you?
So we've got this massive area that we serve with all these, like beautiful landscape and like mountains and incredible vistas. And like if you're an outdoor explorer, like this is kind of base camp in North America for adventure, I would say, in northern British Columbia. And at any given time, we have probably 1,000 projects that we've funded going on throughout the north. Now, You might ask the question, well, is Joel out and his team, going to just driving around all the time going to see these projects? No, unfortunately not. The adventure is largely in our head. In a typical day, we are dealing with funding applications, so people who are applying for money and processing those, scoring those, taking them forward to local government leaders to make decisions. And then once they're funded, now we're talking about contracts, making sure that all the other funding is secured, and then dispersing the dollars and tracking the progress of the project. Do I get out of the office? Yes, I do. So I do get out and travel, and I get to see all those glorious vistas of northern BC as often as possible. But by and large, being a funder means that you're hanging out in an air-conditioned office, making sure that the money flows to the things it's intended to. And we are public sector, so we've got to report to public sector standards. So that means the really fun, kind of boring side of this, which means tracking things really, really well, so that, if an auditor comes along, we can say, yeah, actually the money went to what it was intended for, and here's physical evidence of what this happened. So I'm a desk jockey, by and large, which is the nature of the beast, I suppose, with the occasional opportunity to get out and have adventures and see what's going on that our money is going into.
Let me ask you this. You said that you pretty much at any point in time, you have 1,000 different projects going on. Do you check up on every single, and not you personally, but do you check up on all those 1,000 projects, or is it more of like you audit maybe 80% of those, or do you just have certain reporting requirements from the people you give money to that you then check up on? How does that all process work?
Well, you hit the nail on the head with the last one. It's reporting requirements. So typically what we do to de-risk ourselves is we'll commit dollars to something, but we won't actually pay out the grant until it's built. So that means that the entity that's going to build that, let's say it's like a local government that's expanding their airport, or they're doing a new curling rink or something like that, they have cash flow, they have money that they can use to pay for that project, and then they have the guarantee on the back end that once they submit the reporting to us, we'll pay out that grant. Now, occasionally, we are having a closer relationship because we've got bigger infrastructure projects. So one of the big initiatives we've had over the last 8 years is building like rural broadband, high-speed internet. So in a lot of parts of northern British Columbia, you don't have cell service and you don't have internet, or you don't have high-speed internet. And so that's been a big initiative of the provincial and federal governments in Canada, is to fix that, to level the playing field. Now, those projects are complex, they're multi-year, they're infrastructure, you're building and laying fiber through, mountain passes and that type of thing. So we tend to have a much closer look at those projects to make sure they're proceeding on schedule, and if there's any issues that need to be sorted out. And a lot of that too is because we're not, when you build a mountain bike trail, you might be sticking $30,000 or $50,000 into it, and then you just let that entity go do its thing, and then you get pictures of the mountain bike trail at the end, or maybe you go ride it, and then you pay out the grant. Whereas, when you're building a fiber optic network that stretches 300 or 400 kilometers through mountain passes in northern British Columbia, that requires a lot of concerted effort between us, the province, sometimes the federal government, but also the telecommunications company that's actually doing the building. And British Columbia, I don't know if you know it, but they always say BC stands for bring cash. Because the nature of this province is it's all mountains, it's all water, it's all sort of river valleys. I often describe it as the Balkans of Canada, just by its geography. It's a tough place to build things, and things often will go over budget or take longer, simply because it turns out the Rocky Mountains are rockier than some engineers expected.
So it's interesting. Growing up, I went to a private school. A lot of focus on math and science. History and geography, not my strong suit at all.
Okay.
When it comes to geography, terrible. Europe, I can pick out a few key countries in Europe. Canada, forget about it. It's Canada. You'll appreciate this. I'll probably edit this out. I was talking to my wife the other day, and I was looking at a map, and I don't remember why I was looking at a map of the US. Usually when you look at the map of the US, it's the US contained by itself. They usually don't show Mexico or anything with Canada. And I was looking at the map, and I said to my wife, I was like, huh. And she's like, what? And I'm like, did you know that there's land to the north of Maine? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, I always thought it was a peninsula. But sure enough, there's like a bay or a river, there's a very, very small body of water. And then it's like the rest of Canada, and it goes up to the northeast.
Yeah. Like, it's called New Brunswick.
Yeah. So I
That's
thought you,
awesome.
you would definitely appreciate that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'm the opposite end. I love maps. I'm a humanities student actually on my side. I'm not a STEM guy. So for me, I'll just sit and stare at a map for hours on end and figure it out, right? Yeah.
So let's stick with that with education. How has your education either helped, hindered, or had no effect on what you currently do?
Well, in one sense, like none, and then in another sense, perhaps actually a lot. So I'm a real oddball. And to be real honest with you, I'm not even qualified to be in the job that I'm in. I've been in it for 8 years. I've been here for 12 years. And why I say that is like the Northern Development is fundamentally a financial institution, right? Like so, we manage a large amount of capital, and then we earn interest off of that, and then we get those dollars out working for things. And all those things on their surface would point to you need a skill set that really understands basic accounting, numbers, a background in commerce or business administration. I don't have any of that, so I'm actually a writer. So when I was a kid, I wanted to be a novelist, and I moonlight as a writer today. I still write fiction, but what I went to school for was journalism. So I went and got my undergrad in journalism and went and became a reporter. I did community news for a little while and magazine writing. And then I ended up in Vancouver, where I was born and raised, after floating around a little bit, and became a business reporter. And that was where I got my MBA, if you will, covering heavy industry, primarily mining, forestry, oil and gas, fisheries, agriculture, those types of industries. And that was my day to day. I lived and breathed it. I loved it. And it actually took me around to different parts of Canada and occasionally the US, looking at like mining projects or what was going on in forestry or oil and gas. And that led me to Northern BC. And I fell in love. I'm a city boy. I fell in love with small towns and rural places, and being outdoors and hunting and fishing. And that's kind of where I found my groove and lifestyle. And so I moved up here and I took a job as sort of the communications public relations guy for this organization. And then I did that for 4 years, and it was a ton of fun. Traveled around a lot, saw Northern BC, told the stories about the things we were funding. And then I started to get into like program development. Like I actually got really interested. I understood the business, and got into developing programs, a program for tourism. I started doing economic analysis because I'd kind of done that as a journalist anyway and covered the public markets. So I nerded out, and got into those things. And then our founding CEO retired. And I walked into her office one day and I said, what am I going to do now? Or what do you suggest I do now that you're going? And she said, well, you should apply for the job. She said, and frankly, you should have been in here 2 weeks ago. What is wrong with you? And I said, well, I'm not qualified. Like, I can't do what you do. She said, you'll figure it out. So almost on like out on a limb, I submitted my CV to apply for this job. And I never thought I'd get it. Like, I never thought. I thought at best I would get maybe an interview and it would put my name out there for something else. But I was interested in getting out of PR. And then lo and behold, I got the job, and it was terrifying, like absolutely terrifying. It was almost like, so you've asked for this now you need to go and do this thing. So I took over the trust 8 years ago, and it was a learning curve like nobody else for, I would say, the first 18 months to 2 years. And we've been able to more than double the size of it. So we've had a lot of growth, and done a lot of cool things and changed the nature of what we are. Fundamentally, we're still the same entity we always were, but we've grown. And back to your question, so like, Joel, like, how are you qualified to do this? Well, it turns out there's a couple of things. One, I can hire a CFO who handles all the accounting. So I don't have to touch that stuff. I just have to make sure I've got really good people and I surround myself with really good people who are smarter than me. So that's probably the number one lesson that I'd give to anybody who's in a leadership position or in an organization or just life in general. Number two is we're public sector. So, and I answer to a board of 13 mayors from around Northern BC. And then I have these 4 regional advisory committees, which are made up of 60 plus politicians at the provincial and local government level that I also answer to. So it turns out that being a really good communicator a good listener, somebody who can articulate themselves both in written and oral form is actually an essential component of the job. So I found out that being a communicator and somebody who gets along with people was actually maybe the most essential skill for success in this role. So it turns out 8 years later, I was the right guy for the job, and I've done a good job. But there was a long period of time where I sat there and joked and thought, like, I'm in way over my head, not qualified whatsoever. But what the heck? We'll just keep going.
There were a bunch of things that you said that just made me that sparked some really, really good thoughts. So I love that you said you made a reference to basically not being the smartest person in the room. And I've heard that so many times. You never want to be the smartest person in the room. Great advice. I think you even said like that's great advice for anyone listening. So I really, really like that. But the one thing that made me think of this, you talked about going into the CEO's office. The person's getting ready to retire. And you say, what should I do? And they say, you should put in for it. I'm just recapping everything you just told me. I don't know why I'm doing that. People just skip backwards and hear it again. So essentially what I want to get to is, it seems almost like they took a chance on you, that you felt like you were not 100% qualified to do it. You just threw your hat in the ring. They took it and you're like, all right, well, now what do I do? So my question for you, it seems like they took a chance on you. How likely has it been for you to take a chance on other people, or has that opportunity not come up?
Constantly. Sometimes to my detriment. Hiring is not a perfect science, and you're not going to bat 1,000 on it. But I'm a big believer in paying it forward, to use the old sort of cliched statement. But you nailed it on the head. They took a chance on me, and that's been a theme throughout my career. When I was 24, I had taken a job with a newspaper in Alberta, and I'd done well. I was a city hall reporter, but I hated it, and I quit after like 4 months. And then I wanted to join the Navy, and I moved back to Vancouver, and I was like, forget it, I'm just going to join the military and go see the world for a few years. I wanted an adventure. And I got back to Vancouver, and the editor at the newspaper that I ended up at, Business in Vancouver, he reached out. He said, hey, I hear you're back in Vancouver. And I said, yeah. And I had interned there during university for a period of time and done some freelancing. And they're like, well, we have an opening. Why don't you just come and try it out? And this is like one of the premier publications in British Columbia for business. It's trusted. It's a complex world to be a business reporter. You got to get it right. And there I am, 24 years old, and they hand me, the biggest beat, which was mining, forestry, and oil and gas. And they took a chance on me. And they did the same thing again. I set up, we started doing like in-depth news features, almost investigative work, but not always. And we won an award for one. And then they're like, hey, why don't you become an editor? We're going to make you an editor. And I'm like, well, I don't know anything about editing, and I don't know anything about leading the team. And they're like, don't worry, you'll be fine. So I was an editor, and then I came here as a director of communications, and then eventually the CEO. So there's a theme in my career around people taking a chance on me. And I think it comes down to two things. One, I tend to get along with people. Two, I own my mistakes. So if I screw up, I'll own it, and then I change my behavior and move on. But I also I put my nose to the grindstone and put effort in, right? So people can see, even if I don't have all the answers right away, I'm trying. I'd say another thing that has made me successful is I tend to seek out advice and listen and act on it. So, if I don't know the answer, I will, go to, my superior or other people that I trust, or even certainly my staff now. And I'll say, well, what do you think we should do? And, I don't go in there with when I ask that question, I don't go in there knowing what to do. I'm not asking the question to get the result I secretly want. I literally don't know what to do. And they'll give advice, and I'll just be like, yeah, that sounds good. Let's try that. So to your question, have I paid that forward? Yeah, I have. So I have very purposefully, and I learned this from the previous CEO as well as my other bosses I've had in the past, is I hire for what they call fit, not for skill set. So I am looking to build a team of people who are bringing, an emotional intelligence, good communication skills, that have strong values, that are driven by the mission that we have at this organization. I bring them together. That's what I want to do. And then maybe they don't know anything about funding. I didn't know anything about funding. I didn't know what any of this was when I got here. But if you're passionate about the work that we do, the place that we do it in, and you like coming here every day or most days, let's say, and get along with people, well, that's all you really need. We can show you the rest. And so we've really put an effort into this organization to have that culture. It predated me, and I've been happy to reinforce it. And now I will say, occasionally you get it wrong, right? Occasionally you hire somebody you got a really good feeling about, doesn't work. Then you need to part ways with that person, right? But I'm also a believer when you part ways with a person, it doesn't need to be nasty. Like you need to, like that's another really important lesson is you go in there and you almost treat it like a baseball trade, where you just say, hey, you're an awesome person, but this isn't working. So, we're letting you go or we're trading you out. Here's what we're prepared to offer you. What do you need from me? And that's it. You treat them with respect and just say, this is the direction we're going. And people respond really, really well to that most of the time, right? So on one side, yeah, pay it forward, right? Invest in people, spend time with them, grow them. On the other side, when it's not working, make a decision because it's not the end of the world. Life goes on.
That is awesome. So many great things that you're saying. Going back, you talked about making mistakes. I love that. I tell people that I work with, I tell my family, that the kids especially, that everyone's allowed to make a mistake, but you got to learn something from it. That's that's something that you have to do. So I love that. Like you take your mistake, you own it, and you move on from it. And you also talked about getting along with people, and I think people tend to undervalue that. And I said a very similar thing that you said is that people can learn anything. Generally speaking, we all have our limits, but generally speaking, we can learn anything. But those people skills are so important. They're so key. Joel, I also like how you talked about how you didn't initially set out to go into this career. This career kind of found you, and that's one of the things that's kind of key to my show is that I like to talk about how people that are changing careers can take what they leverage and go somewhere else. And I think your story illustrates that so incredibly well. That being said, if someone is just starting out in their career and they want to do something like what you're doing, what do you think is the best avenue for them? Should they go to university? Should they study communications like you talked about? Would finance be a more strategic approach? What's your thought on that if someone's just entering this career?
Yeah, if you decided that you wanted to get into managing money and getting money out into communities, like doing this type of work of funding, there's going to be two skill sets that are really going to help you. I think one is communications, and then another is going to be commerce. So I would probably recommend to anybody that like if that's the direction you think you want to go or you're interested in enough to pursue it, yeah, go get a Bachelor of Commerce or something like that. Get your degree. That is broad enough that it's going to give you an understanding of finance, administration, marketing, communications, and then really what you're looking to do to get into the funding world. You're going to be typically either in a government role or you're going to be in a not-for-profit community foundation role. So that's what you're looking for. So go reach out to a community foundation if you have them in your community. And just talk to the people that work there and say, like, how did you get here? Like, what does the pathway look like to get here? And government is actually the same. Government looks like a big, scary beast, but often, speaking from the Canadian perspective, typically what you can do is just like, there's a government directory, like find the job you're interested in, like maybe don't go all the way up to the deputy minister or the assistant deputy minister, but, pick a manager or a director and just say, hey, like, I'm interested in the work that you do. Like, can we have a chat or can we have a cup of coffee? I just want to know what the pathway is. And I've done that throughout my career with different things because I didn't always know where I wanted to go either. Like I've sat down with lawyers and I explored law school. I've sat down with professors and explored academia. Like there's been all kinds of things. I think I'm naturally a curious person. So I've felt comfortable doing that. But I think if you get an education and then you start reaching out and making connections, that's going to be it. Back to your comment around people, like one of the lessons that continues to be driven home for me the older I get is that, like we do put up systems and processes in life in order to help people get onto a certain track, right? But you're seeing the world the wrong way if all you see is systems and processes and ladders to climb. Life is about people. And if you get along with people, if you're able to establish relationships that are genuine, that are authentic, that sort of elicit your passion, guess what? Doors open to for you, and you don't have to go the normal route that somebody would advise. And I think I'm an example of that. Like I just always got along with people, and even if I didn't, wanted to treat them respectfully. And if you go through life that way and you work hard, you get along with people, doors will open for you, opportunities will come. And they may not be what you thought you were going to do. Like I thought when I went to journalism school, I'd end up being a war correspondent or something like that. Like that sounded like an adventure. I didn't think I was going to end up in northern British Columbia divvying out money like Santa Claus to help build mountain bike trails and airport expansions. Like this wasn't on the radar. I didn't even know this existed, right? But here I am. And I've been here for 12 years, and it's been incredibly rewarding and fun. And I think that's because of strength of relationships and an openness to, hey, wait, that sounds pretty cool. Why don't I go try that? I think one thing for me is I've always had this feeling that life is super short, and that it's not about accumulating a certain amount of money or getting to retirement and then enjoying my retirement years. It's about the adventure. Try different things, fill your life up. Don't be frenetic with it where you're changing jobs every 2 years. You want to weigh in and learn things and that type of stuff. But I do think you also shouldn't be so committed to one pathway that you don't get the full experience of life, which is trying all kinds of different things and walking down roads that suddenly seem interesting to you. Hey, I wonder where that goes, and go through that doorway, and maybe it leads to something. We haven't talked at all about failure, but there's been a lot of those along the way too, right? Things that didn't work out. But to your point, there's lessons that come out of that are valuable.
That is awesome, Joel. I love your perspective. And even if someone isn't interested in being a funder, I feel like just the, for lack of better words, like the life lessons you're offering are just incredible for anyone. I love that. Now, I am running a little bit short on time, so we'll have to save the failures for another time. But one thing I like to do whenever I'm speaking with someone, I like to give them the opportunity to talk about a cause they believe in, a project they're working on, more about their business. So if there's something specific you'd like to talk about, I'm going to pass the microphone over to you.
Oh, awesome. Well, thanks for that. Well, this is where I get to plug the thing I really love doing in life, which is writing fiction. So I moonlight as a fiction writer, particularly horror. So if somebody, or a lot of people, maybe a million people out there listening, want to each go buy a copy of my book, then I don't have to be a funder anymore. I can just write full time. So I'm going to tell people, Google me, Joel Mackay. You can find my stuff on Amazon. I got a couple of books out. I've got short stories out in anthologies. You can find me on Twitter, on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram, on Threads. Go check out my fiction, and know that when you check out my fiction, the guy who's divvying out money in northern British Columbia for all these altruistic reasons is also in his spare time writing really horrid creature stories and all kinds of stuff. And those two people are the same person, and they're having a lot of fun doing it. So go buy my book. Go do that.
So I love that. I love that. I say this sometimes, when people are listening to you speak, they can't see me, but I'm just losing over here. I'm dying. I'm laughing, smiling. It's just awesome. So what I'll do is I'll get all those relevant links from you. I'll put them on the website. I'll put them in the show notes. So when people are looking for you and they are looking to buy those horror books, they know exactly where to find them.
Sounds good.
Joel, it's been absolutely awesome speaking with you on Time We Discuss and learning what it's like to be a funder.
Thanks so much for having me. Take care.